So my name's Al Bickham and I'm Studio Communications Manager, which means I work with the development team to bring the game to shows like this and to help create some of the gameplay assets that we have and we put on YouTube and that sort of thing. So yeah, I just support the development team with bringing the game to the world, I suppose. So. Very excited, yeah. We're still doing some last-minute balancing and tweaking. So there's so everyone's very busy and very excited. So a lot of team members are sort of coming off the project now. We're just waiting for the day that it unlocks on Steam. So so yeah, it's really exciting. Well, I think everybody has some kind of reference point in the Roman world. I think especially in Europe here, where it's the empire that defined a lot of our cultures in a lot of ways. So a lot of our cultures interacted with Rome, or were Roman for a while, or something like that. But also I think there's, in terms of sort of modern cultural reference, I think everybody identifies with it. I mean, you see this guy here, right? You look at a guy in a uniform like this or a suit of armour like this, and instinctively he's Roman. It's just something that We learn about the Romans at school. We watch great TV shows about Roman times, or movies, and everybody is consumed to media in some way that is a storyline of Rome. And I think everybody knows who Caesar is. Everybody knows who Cleopatra is. It's just a really a cultural reference that everybody connects with in some way. It's a very iconic period, and I think also it's the ultimate empire building period, and it's perfect for a total war game because you have a ton of different factions all vying for supremacy, any of whom really at the time who could have made certain decisions and become the more dominant faction at the time. So it's kind of the perfect setting for a total war game, really. So we retain the level of historical authenticity that you'd expect. So we aim to recreate the world, visually and sort of factually as closely as we can. However, as with every Total War game, as soon as the game goes into the player's hands, history becomes counterfactual. You start carving your own path through the world or staking out your own empire on the map. But something that's interesting that we're doing, I think, is every faction works in a slightly different way. Every faction has some sort of storyline hints that appear as missions throughout the course of your play as a faction. Now the player can ignore these altogether and just play the campaign game as they see fit. They can go and conquer, they can go and conduct diplomacy, have their own political infighting with their own political parties. But what these little storyline missions do is they sort of push you towards some of the key events that actually happen to those factions in history. So if you play as the Carthaginians, for example, you can expect some missions might be issued to you which may push you to sort of conquer Spain and head towards the Alps and maybe head to Italy through the Alps. So, there's certain ways we push people towards, experiencing what may have happened in history, what did happen in history. So, we are not 100% accurate, and we can't be because it's a sandbox game. But we aim for as authenticity as close as possible to what we know from reading the history books. So everybody's an expert in their own area, right? So any development team is a series of specialists working together to, create a complex and fascinating thing, right? So our battle team look specifically at the battles of the time, and they look at the kind of weapons that we used at the time, how those weapons were used, and we have to do a lot of work to make sure the counters are correct. So obvious stuff like if you're if you're riding on a horse, you don't ride towards a guy with a long stick with a spike on the end. Things like that. Just really obvious basic stuff. And it becomes more subtle and interesting and more challenging for the battle team when we have these kind of multi-role units. So things like now we have a lot of troops with precursor weapons. So they'll throw a wave of spear. They'll all carry one spear, and so that unit will throw their spears into the enemy that they're charging. So it's a nice little morale punch, and it's a nice little hit, and it'll take the first line of guys down. So it's just an extra bit of damage as you're going and a bit of range damage. So so we have to think about balancing that. We have to think about how how that's going to work in the game and make sure that those units are costed correctly against that. So, but as I said, every sort of member of the development team is a little expert in their own area. So, the writing team has to look very deeply into characters and the politics of the time, and when they're writing those individual unit descriptions, they're off reading Polybius and the histories and which lists troop makeups of different armies and that kind of stuff. So. And the kind of key characters of famous generals and things like that. So they're off researching that kind of stuff. So everybody has their own little area. There's a I'll give a shout out to Steve Virgo, who is one of our scripters, who's worked very hard on a lot of the historical battles. So Teutoburg Forest, the battle that we've got here on the stand today, playing today. So a lot of that is his work, and it's an incredible challenge. You've got to go and you must go and play it. But it's he had to look very, very carefully at all the different descriptions of the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, because that was a really big deal for Rome, right? That shook the foundations of Rome when Varus's forces, the three eagles were lost in Germania. So, he's had to go back and into the history books and read up on that, and from many different perspectives as well. And sometimes perspectives differ, from the ancient historians. So we have to kind of take a balanced view and go, what's the most likely thing, and sometimes what's the most entertaining thing out of those descriptions. We should go for that one because it had a more dramatic outcome. So we stick very, we draw very heavily from history, but of course sometimes gameplay and history, very occasionally, and not very often actually, but very occasionally they'll come into conflict. At which point we are on the side of gameplay because we're making a game. We want this to be an entertaining thing. So yeah. Yep. So Total War Rome 2 has a worldwide release date actually on the 3rd of September 2013.
Germania will be free!